we're living in a time when the winds of change that blow one way and another are having a special effect on us. In mindfulness, there are the four vicissitudes of pairs of opposites that can affect us favorably or unfavorably. And two of those pairs are especially prevalent right now. One is the pair of gain and loss. And right now we are in an experience that is mostly about loss. There's the loss of human life. There's the loss of physical well-being. There's the loss of economic well-being. And although there may be some gains woven into all of this loss, it's this sense of loss that is so predominant at this time. And loss is often very difficult for us to deal with, and equanimity is a way of dealing with that loss. Another pair of opposites, winds of difficulty and change, is called pleasure and pain. And of course, right now we're experiencing a great deal of pain, and much of that pain is showing up as uncertainty. We're not clear as to how long this pandemic is going to last. We don't know how devastating it's going to be. In many ways, we're uncertain about our ability to cope with it. Our ability to cope with the loss and the pain, our ability to cope with being sequestered, our ability to cope with economic difficulties. And this loss and this pain are suffering. Things are not the way we would prefer to have them be. And this is what's meant by suffering. Fortunately, as mindfulness practitioners, we can turn to the quality of equanimity. So let's take a few moments and explore what equanimity is all about. It turns out that it's actually a pretty important aspect of mindfulness. For instance, it shows up in 3 different places in the Eightfold Path to Liberation. One of the places it shows up is in the behaviors, a list of 12 behaviors that lead to liberation. These behaviors include gratitude, patience, truthfulness, resolve, and equanimity, among others. And equanimity also shows up in 2 different practices that lead to liberation. One of these practices is awakening. How we awaken from what holds us back in our lives, how we awaken to our own freedom and liberation. And there are 7 factors of awakening, and equanimity is on that list. And then there are the heart practices, the practices for developing the 4 qualities of the heart: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So equanimity gets a fairly prominent place in mindfulness practice. One of the essential characteristics of equanimity is centeredness. It's this ability to come back to center in the face of the vicissitudes of life. And one of the examples that's given to describe coming back to center is that of a sailboat with a deep keel and ballast at the base of the keel, so that no matter how hard the winds blow and tilt the boat over, the boat always has the ability to come back to center. The wind eventually falls out of the sails and the boat pops back upright. Or one of my favorite examples is my recollection from childhood of a toy that was plastic, and you blew it up, and it stood maybe about 3 feet high, and it had sand in the bottom. And you could push it or shove it or punch it all the way down to when it was horizontal. And as soon as you stopped, it popped right back to upright. It had this quality of centeredness about it. Another aspect of centeredness is not getting caught up in our reactivity. We're always going to be reactive to external stimuli. It's how we're put together. It's how we cope with life. The question is, will we be overwhelmed by, controlled by, lose our sense of skillfulness and thoughtfulness in this reactivity? Or will we have the space that equanimity offers to come back to center? Another characteristic of equanimity is insight. Insight is the ability to see clearly the realities of our lives that are right in front of us. One of those realities is impermanence. Conditions today are not the same as they were 2 months ago in our lives, not the same as they will be 2 months from now, 6 months from now. The various experiences of life come and go. We all get old, we all get sick, and we all eventually die. Life is impermanent. Another reality of life is suffering. In our never-ending quest for sense pleasure and for constructing an identity, we find out how frustrating those experiences are, how unsatisfying they can be, how limiting they can be, how they eventually lead to suffering. We also discover that our sense of self is more of an illusion than we are inclined to believe it to be, that there really is no fixed, independent self. Our sense of self keeps changing, and with interdependence, we discover that we're connected to everything. And this experience today is probably the most powerful example of interdependence that any of us has had in our lifetimes. Another set of realities that's important to pay attention to are the 4 conditions of being human that are beyond our control. How our brains have evolved, our genetic composition, the conditioning and experiences we had when we were young, and social and cultural norms. The specifics of each of these conditions is beyond our control. And yet what happens next is up to us. With equanimity, we can cultivate a sense of space and make thoughtful, skillful choices. I suspect all of you are similar to me in the sense that I'm always a bit more comfortable, a bit more at ease when I'm pretty clear about the facts of a situation, about the realities of it, rather than either having things be fuzzy or having me be in denial or wishing things other than they are. A third quality of equanimity is impartiality. Equanimity, as I mentioned before, is a quality of the heart, and it's described as love that allows. It's an antidote for our partiality. And our partiality is this inclination to be attached to what we believe in and to be averse to what we see as different from ourselves. With impartiality, we're able to hold all aspects of being alive equally, without judgment, without being judgmental about them, without being controlled by our inclinations for attachment and aversion. We can still retain discernment. We can see the difference between what's harmful and what's helpful, what's skillful and unskillful. So these are three qualities of equanimity, three characteristics of equanimity that give it its value: centeredness, insight, impartiality. So the question becomes then, how do we cultivate equanimity in our lives? Over the next few moments of this guided meditation, I'll lead us through some very specific practices that cultivate different skills that are useful in building equanimity. Concentration, being aware of attachment and aversion, and connecting with all. So let's begin our meditation. Gathering our attention in this place at this moment. Beginning by taking 2 or 3 deep in-breaths, allowing our lungs to fill perhaps all the way up to our shoulders, and holding that in-breath for just a moment, and then slowly letting go on the out-breath. And again, filling the lungs from the bottom up. Feeling that sense of openness and spaciousness inside our lungs and our body as we fill with air. And holding and letting go. And now turning our attention to our breathing. Noticing how our breathing shows up in our bodies. Perhaps the flow of air in and out of the nostrils, or the rising and falling of the chest, or the expanding and contracting of the abdomen. Choosing one of these 3 ways to concentrate our attention on our breathing. And over the next few moments, bringing another level, a heightened level of concentration to our breathing. Bringing extra focus to the process of breathing in, wherever we're noticing that. And then letting go of that extra effort on the out-breath. Effort, letting go. And bringing a little more concentration to it by counting. Counting 1 on the in-breath, 2 on the out-breath, 3 on the in-breath, and so forth, counting to 10, and then begin again. Concentration with skillful effort leads to tranquility, to centeredness. This ability to concentrate makes us less vulnerable to the distractions of attachment and aversion. And shifting now to practicing being aware of the arising of attachment or aversion. In these moments, gradually becoming aware of whatever thoughts are arising. Especially any thoughts related to this experience of being in the pandemic. Noticing how some thoughts just come and go, and how some thoughts are a little stickier. Being in this impartial observer role, noticing the thoughts that stick around. and noticing any inclination to be attached to that thought or to avoid it, to be averse to it. Merely observing the arising of attachment or aversion. Labeling attachment as attachment. Labeling aversion as aversion. And moving on. Noticing any physical sensations that accompany attachment. Or alternatively, the physical sensations that accompany aversion. Noticing as an impartial observer. And now shifting away from the practice of impartiality and toward the practice of connecting with all. Bringing to mind someone you know who is struggling, suffering at this time. Perhaps it's someone who has contracted the virus, or someone who has someone close to them who's contracted the virus. Or someone who's struggling with financial well-being. Holding the image of that person right in front of you. Allowing your empathy to arise. Feeling in your heart the suffering and struggling of this being. Attuning to what's happening around your heart. And in response to experiencing this other's suffering, considering ways to alleviate the suffering. Alleviating is not fixing. We are unlikely to be able to fix another's suffering or struggling. But perhaps there's some action we can take to alleviate it. Or perhaps some way of being, showing up with kindness and care for this person, reaching out in a way that says, I see and feel your struggle. I'm holding you in my heart. I am present. And wishing that person well and letting that person go. Now bringing to mind an image of a loved one whom the current experience has disconnected you from, whom you're not able to see as often, especially someone whom you're used to seeing in physical proximity, but no longer can. Bringing an image of this person right in front of you and allowing a smile around the eyes, around the mouth. Allowing your empathy to arise. Allowing loving kindness to arise. Allowing joy to arise that appreciates who this person is and any good things that are happening for this person. Attuning to what's happening around your heart as you experience this love and caring for this person. And now wishing this person well and saying goodbye. And bringing your attention back to your breathing. Gently noticing this most basic of life forces. And as you come back into this space from this meditation, pay a little extra attention to what's happening inside you, to how you are. And closing today with a poem titled A Song with No End by Charles Bukowski. When Whitman wrote, "I sing the body electric," I know what he meant. I know what he wanted. To be completely alive every moment, in spite of the inevitable. We can't cheat death, but we can make it work so hard that when it does take us, it will have known a victory just as perfect as ours.